The dust hung in the air like a veil of sorrow, turning the afternoon sun into a pale ghost of itself. Jacob Mercer stood before what remained of his homestead, his calloused hands hanging limp at his sides, his eyes tracing the blackened timber frames that jutted from the earth like the ribs of some great fallen beast. 3 months had passed since the fire, 3 months since he'd ridden into town for supplies and returned to find his world reduced to smoke and memory. 3 months since they'd pulled Martha's charred body from the ruins, or what they'd said was her body, wrapped it in canvas, and laid it in the ground beside their stillborn daughter, under the cottonwood tree on the hill. He came here every few days, though he couldn't say why. There was nothing left to salvage, nothing left to save. The other ranchers had offered help, offered to rebuild. But Jacob had waved them away with empty thanks and hollow promises. What was the point of rebuilding when the only thing that had made the place a home was gone? His ranch hands had scattered to other outfits, and he'd taken to sleeping in the line shack 3 miles north, drinking whiskey until sleep finally claimed him, then waking before dawn to tend the cattle that somehow still needed feeding, still needed watching, as if the world hadn't ended at all. The wind picked up, stirring the ashes that still lay thick in places, and Jacob turned to leave when something caught his eye. A corner of paper, yellowed and curled, protruding from beneath a collapsed section of stone chimney. The chimney had been Martha's pride, built from river rock they'd gathered together that first summer, each stone placed with care and mortar mixed with hope. He'd avoided touching it these past months, as if disturbing it might shatter some final connection to her. But the paper called to him. He stepped carefully over the debris, his boots crunching on charred wood and broken glass, and knelt beside the chimney. The stone had shifted recently, probably from the last rain, revealing a gap that hadn't been there before. He reached in, his fingers closing around the paper, and pulled it free. It was an envelope, water-stained and smoke, damaged, but intact. His breath caught in his throat when he saw the writing on the front, elegant script that he'd have known anywhere, in any condition, in this world or the next. Martha's handwriting, his name written in her hand. His fingers trembled as he turned the envelope over. It was sealed with wax unmarked. He sat down hard on a section of fallen beam, heedless of the soot that blackened his trousers, and stared at the envelope as if it might vanish like morning frost. This made no sense. Martha was dead. He'd stood at her grave, had thrown the first handful of dirt onto that canvas, wrapped form, had felt his heart turn to stone in his chest. The seal broke easily, and he drew out 2 pages folded together, covered in that same careful script. His eyes blurred with tears before he'd read a single word, and he had to wipe them away with the back of his hand, leaving streaks of ash across his face. Then he began to read, and the world fell away around him. My dearest Jacob, if you are reading this, then you have found what I hoped you would find, and I am either far from here, or I am dead in truth. I pray it is the former. I pray you can forgive me for what I am about to tell you, for the deception I have been forced to practice, for the pain I know this will cause you. But you deserve the truth, and if I cannot give it to you in person, then let these words carry what my voice cannot. Jacob's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the pages. He steadied himself, took a breath that felt like swallowing glass, and continued. The men who came to our ranch 3 days ago, the ones I told you were looking to buy cattle, they were not cattlemen. They were bounty hunters, Jacob, and they were looking for me. My name is not Martha Hennessy, though I have worn that name like a second skin for 5 years now, and the woman who bore it has become more real to me than the woman I was born. My true name is Sarah Catherine Brennan, and I am wanted in Texas for murder. The words swam before Jacob's eyes. He read them again, then a third time, trying to make them mean something different, something that made sense in the world he knew. But they remained stubbornly, impossibly the same. Before you judge me too harshly, know that the man I killed deserved his death 100 times over. His name was Douglas Brennan, and he was my husband. My first husband, though husband is too kind a word for what he was. He was a monster, Jacob, a devil in a gentleman's clothes. For 3 years I endured his fists, his rage, his cruelty that went beyond the physical into realms I cannot bring myself to write about even now. I was 19 when I married him, foolish and flattered by his attention. My father had died the winter before, and Douglas seemed strong and capable, a man who could provide stability and protection. Jacob's jaw clenched as he read, a cold fury building in his chest for a man he'd never met, a man already dead. It nearly killed me twice, Jacob. Once he threw me down the stairs of our home in Austin, and I lay at the bottom with broken ribs, unable to move, for hours before he finally summoned a doctor. Another time he held my head under the water in the horse trough, until I stopped struggling, then pulled me out at the last moment, laughing as I gasped and choked. The sheriff was his cousin. The judge was his friend. There was no law that would help me, no authority I could turn to. I was his property in the eyes of the law and the community, and what a man did with his property was his own business. The pages crinkled in Jacob's grip. He forced himself to relax his hands, to keep reading. Then one night, after he'd beaten me unconscious, I woke to find him asleep in his chair, drunk on whiskey, his gun on the table beside him. I don't remember making the decision, Jacob. I remember picking up the gun. I remember the weight of it in my hand. I remember the sound it made, impossibly loud in that quiet house, and the way he slumped forward without a word, without a cry. I remember walking out of that house into the Texas night with nothing but the clothes on my back and the gun in my hand. I walked until dawn, then I traded the gun to a farmer for a ride north. I kept moving, kept changing, until I wasn't Sarah Brennan anymore. Until I became Martha Hennessy, a widow from Missouri, which was true enough in spirit if not in fact. Jacob looked up from the pages, staring at the ruins around him with new eyes. 5 years they'd been married, 5 years of trust and love and building a life together. 5 years of lies, whispered a voice in the back of his mind. But he pushed it away. The woman he'd loved had been real, whatever her name had been. When I met you in Abilene, I thought I would tell you everything. I opened my mouth a dozen times to confess, to lay my past at your feet, and let you decide if you could accept it. But each time I tried, I saw the goodness in your eyes, the decency, and I was afraid. Afraid you would see me as a murderer, as a criminal, as something unworthy of the love you offered so freely. So I stayed silent, and my silence became its own kind of lie, growing larger with each passing day until it seemed too massive to overcome. A hawk cried out overhead, wheeling against the pale sky. And Jacob remembered teaching Martha to ride. How she'd laughed when she'd finally managed to gallop without fear, her hair streaming behind her like a banner. He remembered their wedding night, the gentleness of her touch, the way she'd wept after, and how he'd held her, thinking she was simply overcome with emotion. How many of those tears had been born of guilt, of the weight of secrets she carried. I have been happy with you, Jacob. Happier than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me peace, safety, a home. You gave me love without conditions, without cruelty, without the fear that haunted every moment of my first marriage. I tried to be a good wife to you, to earn the grace you showed me, though I know now that love cannot be earned like wages, cannot be bargained for like cattle. It simply is or it isn't. And yours was Jacob. I felt it every day, and it was the greatest gift I have ever received. His throat tightened, and he had to stop reading for a moment, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes until he saw stars. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Storm coming, his mind noted automatically, though it seemed absurdly unimportant. 3 days ago, when those men came, I recognized the look in their eyes immediately. The one who did the talking, he had a daguerreotype, and though he never showed it to me, I knew what it must be. A picture of Sarah Brennan, taken on her wedding day, smiling like a fool who didn't know she was walking into hell. I told them I didn't know anything about cattle prices, that they should speak with you when you returned. They said they would wait in town. But I knew they wouldn't wait long. I knew they would come back with that picture, would ask questions, would put pieces together. Jacob's hands tightened on the pages again. The body they'd found in the ruins. The one they'd said was too badly burned to identify, beyond being a woman of the right height and build. His stomach turned over as understanding began to dawn. I am so sorry, Jacob. I am sorry for what I did, for the deception I practiced, for leaving you in such a terrible way. I staged the fire. There was a woman in town, Ada Coleman, who ran the boarding house. She died 2 days before the men came, died quietly in her sleep with no family to claim her. No one to mourn her passing. I went to the undertaker and told him I would pay for her burial, that she had been kind to me when I first came to town. He was grateful to have one less pauper's grave to dig. That night, I went to the funeral parlor and I took her body. I brought her here, to our home, and I dressed her in my clothes. I took my wedding ring off my finger and put it on hers. Then I set the fire. Jacob's vision blurred again, and this time he let the tears fall unchecked. The enormity of what she'd done, the desperation that must have driven her, crashed over him like a wave. I know how this sounds. I know what it makes me in your eyes. I desecrated a dead woman's body to save myself. I burned down the home we built together. I let you believe I was dead, let you grieve for a ghost. I don't expect your forgiveness, Jacob. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know that the woman you loved was real, even if her name was false. I wanted you to know that every moment we shared was precious to me. That leaving you was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than killing Douglas. Harder than running. Harder than anything I could imagine. The handwriting became shakier here, as if she'd been crying while she wrote. I am heading north to the Montana Territory. There is a town there called Copper Ridge, where I heard they ask few questions and care little about pasts. I will find work. We'll start over again with a new name, a new story. I will not contact you, Jacob. It wouldn't be fair to you, wouldn't be safe for either of us. You need to let me go. You need to let Martha Mercer stay buried on that hillside and move on with your life. Find a good woman, an honest woman, and build the life you deserve. Have children, grow old, be happy. That is what I want for you. But there was more, a final paragraph, and Jacob's eyes devoured it hungrily. But if you cannot let me go, if you cannot move on, if you find this letter and decide that you want the truth more than you want peace, then come find me. Come to Copper Ridge and ask for Emma Cole. I will be working as a seamstress if I can find such work, or as a cook if I cannot. I will wait 6 months from the day I write this, which is June 15th in the year of our Lord 1873. If you come, I will tell you everything, answer every question, submit to whatever judgment you deem fit. If you do not come, I will know that you have chosen the wiser path, and I will try to find some measure of peace in that knowledge. Either way, know that I loved you, Jacob Mercer. I loved you with all the broken pieces of my heart, and I will love you until the day I die. Yours in truth, if not in name, Martha. Jacob sat motionless for a long time, the letter resting in his lap. His mind a whirlwind of emotions too complex to name. Betrayal warred with understanding, grief with something that might have been hope, anger with a fierce protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. She had lied to him, had built their entire marriage on a foundation of deception. But she had also trusted him with the truth in the end, had given him a choice instead of simply vanishing into the unknown. He looked at the date on the letter again, June 15th. 3 months ago, the day before the fire, which meant he had 3 months left before her deadline expired, before she would assume he wasn't coming and disappear into a new life with a new name. The sun was sinking toward the horizon now, painting the ruins in shades of gold and crimson. Jacob stood slowly, his legs stiff from sitting, and carefully folded the letter, tucking it into the inside pocket of his vest, close to his heart. He walked to where the bedroom had been, to a section of floor that had somehow survived the fire, and knelt down. With his knife, he pried up a board, then another, until he exposed the small metal box he'd hidden there years ago. Inside was money, nearly $3,000, saved over a decade of hard work and careful management. Money they'd been setting aside to expand the ranch, to buy more land, to build a future. He took half the money, left the rest for the hands who would manage the place in his absence, and stood. The cattle would need to be sold or leased. Arrangements would need to be made. But those were problems for tomorrow. Tonight, he had a different task. He rode into town as the last light was fading from the sky, his horse sensing his urgency and stretching into a ground-eating lope. The general store was closing, but Samuel Watts saw him coming and waited, holding the door open. "Jacob, what can I do for you?" "I need supplies, Sam. Trail supplies. Enough for a long journey north." Sam's eyebrows rose, but he asked no questions, just began pulling items from the shelves. "How long a journey we talking about?" "Montana Territory. Copper Ridge." A low whistle. "That's a far piece. Take you 6-7 weeks if you push hard. Weather's gonna turn cold before you make it back." "I might not be coming back," Jacob said quietly. Sam studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll pack you out proper then. You'll need cold weather gear, extra ammunition, medical supplies. I assume you're taking the buckskin, tough horse, but you'll want a pack horse too. I've got a good mule, steady and sure-footed." They worked together in the gathering darkness, and when they were done, Jacob had everything he would need for the journey. As he was loading the last pack onto the mule, Sam cleared his throat. "Jacob, I know it ain't my place to ask, but this have anything to do with Martha?" Jacob paused, his hands stilling on the rope. "Everything to do with her, Sam. Everything. She ain't dead, is she?" The directness of the question surprised him. "What makes you say that?" "Just a feeling. The way you been these past months, like a man looking for something instead of a man mourning. And that fire, it never sat right with me. Too convenient, too complete." Sam shifted his weight. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Jacob. You're a good man. You deserve some happiness." Jacob swung into the saddle, the mule's lead rope in his hand. "Thank you, Sam. For everything." He rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horses and catch a few hours of sleep. The ranch was dark when he arrived at dawn, but his foreman, Tom Hutchins, was already up, building a fire outside the bunkhouse. "Boss," Tom said, surprise evident in his voice. "Didn't expect to see you this early." Jacob dismounted and accepted the cup of coffee Tom offered. "Tom, I need to ask a favor. A big one. Name it. I'm leaving for a while. Might be gone months. Might not come back at all. I need you to manage the place, sell off half the herd. Use the money to keep things running. There's more in the box under the floorboards if you need it. Papers are with the lawyer in town, giving you authority to act on my behalf." Tom's weathered face creased with concern. "You in some kind of trouble, Jacob?" "No trouble, just something I need to do." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You remember Martha, Tom? You remember how she was? Best woman I ever knew, boss. Treated us hands like family. Cried with us when young Billy died, brought soup when we was sick. A real lady, she was," Jacob agreed. "And I got reason to believe she might still be out there somewhere. I have to find out, Tom. I have to know for sure." Understanding dawned in Tom's eyes, followed quickly by hope. "Then you best get moving, boss. And you bring her home if you can." The journey north was long and hard, through territory that grew progressively rougher and more wild. Jacob pushed the pace as hard as he dared, trading the buckskin and mule for fresh animals twice, always moving north, always following the maps and the information he could gather from other travelers. He crossed rivers swollen with late summer rain, navigated mountain passes where the trail narrowed to a ribbon of dirt, clinging to sheer cliff faces, and spent nights camped under stars so bright and numerous they seemed close enough to touch. He thought about Martha constantly, or Sarah, or whoever she really was. He thought about the woman who had killed to free herself from a monster, who had run for years, who had built a new life from nothing but will and hope. He thought about the lies she'd told, but also about the truth she'd lived, the love she'd given freely, the home she'd helped him build. Were 5 years of happiness worth more than the deception that had made them possible? Could he forgive her for the lies? Could he forgive himself if he didn't try? The Montana Territory was vast and beautiful in a way that took his breath away. Mountains that dwarfed anything he'd seen back home rose against skies so blue they seemed painted. The air was thinner here, colder. with an edge that spoke of the winter to come. He reached Copper Ridge in late September, 3 weeks before Martha's deadline would expire. The town was small, raw, barely more than a collection of buildings clustered around a main street of churned mud. But it was bustling with miners and prospectors, with men chasing dreams of gold and silver in the surrounding hills. Jacob tied his horse outside the general store and went inside, his heart hammering against his ribs. The storekeeper was a portly man with a salt and pepper beard and shrewd eyes. "Help you, stranger. I'm looking for someone, a woman named Emma Cole. I heard she might be working as a seamstress or a cook." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "She in some kind of trouble?" "No trouble. I'm an old friend, just hoping to reconnect." The storekeeper studied him for a long moment, then seemed to reach some internal decision. "Emma Cole does sewing work out of her cabin, about a mile west of town, up on the ridge overlooking the valley. Small place, painted blue, can't miss it. But mister," he leaned forward, "she's a good woman, keeps to herself, don't bother nobody. You bring trouble to her door, you'll answer to more than just me. This town looks after its own." Jacob nodded, understanding the warning and respecting it. "I'm not here to bring trouble. I promise you that." The ride out to the cabin seemed to take forever and no time at all. His hands were slick with sweat despite the cold air, and his chest felt tight. What would he say to her? What would she say to him? Had she changed her mind, moved on, given up hope that he would come? The cabin came into view, small and neat with blue paint that looked fresh, a thin ribbon of smoke rising from the chimney. A vegetable garden, mostly harvested now, occupied a plot beside the house, and chickens pecked in a fenced yard. It looked peaceful, carefully tended, like a place someone was trying to build into a home. Jacob dismounted and stood for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he walked to the door and knocked. Footsteps inside, light and quick. The door opened, and Martha stood there, frozen in the doorway, her face straining of color. She was thinner than he remembered, her hair longer, but her eyes were the same, those warm brown eyes that had captivated him the first moment he'd seen her. "Jacob," she whispered, his name barely more than a breath. "Hello, Martha." His voice was rough, thick with emotion. "Or should I say Sarah?" She swayed slightly, reaching out to steady herself against the door frame. "You found the letter." "I found it. Read every word." He paused, searching her face. "Were you telling me the truth? All of it?" "Every word," she said, tears starting to track down her cheeks. "Every single word." They stood there, separated by a threshold that seemed as wide as an ocean, neither moving, neither speaking. Finally, Martha stepped back, opening the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" Jacob walked into the cabin, his eyes taking in the simple furnishings, the sewing basket in the corner, the Bible on the table, the photograph on the mantel. He stepped closer to the photograph, then froze. It was their wedding picture, the one that had been in their bedroom, somehow salvaged from the fire. "I couldn't leave it," Martha said quietly. "I knew I should, knew it was dangerous to keep, but I couldn't. It was all I had left of us." Jacob turned to face her, this woman he had loved, had mourned, had journeyed 1,000 miles to find. "Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you tell me before?" "I was afraid," she said simply. "Afraid you would see me differently, afraid you would turn me in, afraid you would send me away. And I was selfish, Jacob. I wanted to keep what we had, wanted to pretend I could be Martha Mercer forever and Sarah Brennan had never existed." "The woman you killed," Jacob said. "Your husband. Did he deserve it?" "Yes," Martha said without hesitation. "He was evil, Jacob. Pure evil. But I won't pretend I feel nothing about taking a life. I see his face sometimes in dreams. Not with anger or regret, but with a kind of sadness that any human being could become so twisted, so cruel." Jacob crossed to the window, looking out at the valley below, painted golden in the afternoon light. He thought about his own life, the choices he'd made, the lines he'd walked between right and wrong. He'd killed men in the war, killed more in self-defense in the years since. The law called some killing justified and some murder. But in the dark hours of the night, did the ghosts care about such distinctions? "I don't care about your past," he said finally, turning back to face her. I don't care what your name used to be or what you had to do to survive. I care about the woman who laughed at my terrible jokes, who sang while she cooked, who held my hand through the winter fevers, who built a home with me. That woman was real, Martha. Whatever else was false, she was real. Martha's face crumpled, and she pressed her hands to her mouth, trying to hold back sobs. I thought I'd lost you forever. I thought you would hate me. Jacob crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her as she wept against his chest. I rode 1,000 miles to find you, he said into her hair. Do you really think I did that just to tell you I hate you? She pulled back, looking up at him with red, rimmed eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Martha. I'm saying I don't care if that's your real name or not. I'm saying I want you to come home with me, if you'll have me, if you can trust me enough to try again. But the bounty hunters, let them come, Jacob said fiercely. Texas is a long way from Montana, and even farther from home. And if they do come, they'll find out what it means to threaten a man's wife in his own territory. Tom and the boys would stand with us. Sam and half the town would too. You're not alone anymore, Martha. You don't have to run anymore. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for judgment, for any sign that he was speaking from obligation rather than love. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen since arriving. I didn't think I would ever feel safe again, she said. I didn't think I would ever feel at home anywhere. But with you, Jacob, I do. With you, I'm home. He kissed her then, gentle and deep, a kiss that held all the grief of the past months, all the fear and uncertainty, but also all the hope for the future. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and both were smiling. We should probably get married again, Martha said, laughing through her tears. Under my real name this time. Make it legal. What can do that? Jacob agreed. But first, we need to get you home before the snow flies. It's a long ride, and I want to be back before winter sets in proper. They spent the rest of the day packing Martha's belongings, which were few, and making arrangements to sell the cabin. The storekeeper, true to his word, came out to check on Martha, took one look at the two of them together, and nodded with satisfaction. You did good, Emma, he said, using the name she'd given him. Or whoever you really are. You did real good. They left Copper Ridge at dawn 2 days later, riding south into a sunrise that painted the world in shades of gold and red. Martha rode beside Jacob, no longer behind him or in a wagon, but as an equal partner facing whatever lay ahead. They talked as they traveled, about everything and nothing, filling in the gaps of months apart, of years of partial truth. She told him about her childhood in Texas, about her mother who had died when she was young, about her father who had tried his best, but never quite recovered from his wife's death. She told him about Douglas in detail. She'd been unable to include in the letter, and Jacob listened without judgment, his anger directed not at her, but at the man who had broken her so thoroughly she'd seen no other escape but to kill him. In turn, Jacob told her about the months after the fire, the darkness he'd fallen into, the way he'd let the ranch slide, let himself slide, until the day he'd found her letter. He told her about Tom's loyalty, about Sam's unspoken understanding, about the community that had held him together, even when he'd wanted nothing more than to fall apart. The journey home took longer than the journey north had taken. They traveled at a gentler pace, camping under the stars, cooking over open fires, relearning each other in ways both old and new. They were different people now than they'd been before the fire, marked by loss and separation, but also by a deeper understanding of what they meant to each other, of what they were willing to risk and sacrifice for love. They reached the ranch in late October, just as the first serious cold snap settled over the plains. Tom was mending fence when he saw them riding in, and he dropped his tools and ran to meet them, whooping with joy. By evening, word had spread, and the ranch was full of hands and neighbors, all wanting to welcome Martha home, all carefully not asking questions about where she'd been or why. The house was gone, but that didn't matter. They moved into the line shack temporarily, making plans to rebuild in the spring, to build something new from the ashes of the old. Martha started wearing her wedding ring again, the one Jacob had given her, the one she'd taken off only to place on a dead woman's hand. They married again in December, in a small ceremony at the church in town, with Martha standing before the preacher and giving her full name, Sarah Catherine Brennan Mercer, claiming all the parts of herself for the first time in years. The bounty hunters never came. Maybe the trail had gone cold, or maybe they'd found other prey, more recent fugitives with fresh rewards on their heads. Martha stopped looking over her shoulder quite so often, stopped tensing at the sound of unfamiliar horses. The past would always be there, a shadow that never quite disappeared, but it no longer defined the present, no longer controlled the future. They built their new house the following spring, bigger than the old one, with room for the family they hoped to have. The river rock chimney went up first, built with the same stones from the old one, cleaned and reset, a link between what had been and what would be. Martha planted roses by the front door and a garden behind the house. Jacob bought more land, expanded the herd, made plans for the years ahead. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the plains, Martha's hand in Jacob's, both of them content in the silence that no longer needed to be filled with words. They had been given a second chance, a gift not everyone received, and they knew it. They had walked through fire, literally and figuratively, and emerged on the other side, not unscathed but alive, together, and grateful for every ordinary moment of the life they were building. The letter that had brought them back together was tucked away in a locked box, along with their important papers, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. But more than that, it was a testament to the power of truth, to the possibility of redemption, to the hope that even the deepest wounds could heal given time and love, and the courage to face the past with open eyes. And sometimes, late at night when the world was quiet, Martha would lie in Jacob's arms and whisper thank you for believing in her, for finding her, for loving all the parts of her, even the broken ones, even the scared ones, even the ones she'd tried to hide. And Jacob would hold her close and whisper back that there was nothing to thank him for, that loving her was the easiest thing he'd ever done, that he would ride 1,000 miles again, and again if that's what it took to bring her home. They were survivors, both of them, marked by hardship but not defeated by it. And in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the West, where the strong preyed on the weak, and the past had a way of catching up to those who ran, they had found something precious and rare, something worth fighting for, something worth the risk and the pain and the uncertainty. They had found each other, and that, in the end, was everything.